20% of the world's oil. One of the narrowest, most strategically vital waterways on Earth. And right now, it's the center of the most dangerous standoff of the 21st century. The United States has just launched a full naval blockade of Iranian ports. Ships are being intercepted. Oil prices are spiking toward $100 a barrel, and the world is holding its breath. This is the story of how we got here and what happens next. To understand this crisis, you first need to understand the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow strip of water, just 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. Roughly 20% of the world's oil and natural gas normally passes through it. Wikipedia. Every single day, millions of barrels of crude oil from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Iraq, and Iran flow through this bottleneck on their way to markets in Asia, Europe, and beyond. Whoever controls this strait controls the global energy supply. And for the past several weeks, Iran has been doing exactly that. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched surprise airstrikes on Iran, targeting military and government sites, as well as assassinating Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and other senior Iranian officials, triggering what is now known as the 2026 Iran War. Iran's response was swift and devastating, not just with missiles and drones, but with an economic weapon, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps issued warnings forbidding passage through the strait, launched 21 confirmed attacks on merchant ships, and reportedly laid sea mines across the waterway. Major container shipping companies, including Maersk, CMA CGM, and Hapag-Lloyd, suspended transits through the strait and related routes such as the Red Sea. Wikipedia. The effect on the global economy was immediate. Brent crude prices surged. The restriction of shipments by more than 90%, around 10 million barrels per day, raised energy and agricultural costs worldwide. Diplomacy was tried. In Islamabad, Pakistan, a rare face-to-face summit was organized. The U.S. delegation, led by Vice President J.D. Vance, met with Iranian and Pakistani negotiators for more than 21 hours during the talks. Peace talks broke down over what the U.S. described as Iran's unwillingness to give up its efforts to obtain a nuclear weapon. Tehran's demands included control of the Strait of Hormuz, payment of war reparations, a regional ceasefire, including in Lebanon, and the release of its frozen assets abroad. On April 12, J.D. Vance announced the talks had failed. The door to diplomacy had closed, at least for now. Within hours, President Trump made a dramatic announcement. Trump said the U.S. military had begun a blockade of Iranian ports, drawing threats of retaliation from Iran. The U.S. military said the blockade began on Monday, April 13, 2026, at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. CENTCOM clarified that the blockade would be enforced on all ships entering or leaving Iranian ports and coastal areas, but would not impede freedom of navigation for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz to and from non-Iranian ports. The logic was clear. Iran had been blockading the world's oil supply while letting its own exports through, and profiting enormously from the price spike. A U.S. blockade would cut off the financial windfall Tehran was reaping and further hobble an economy that was already crashing even before the war started. So what does this blockade actually look like on the water? The U.S. military currently has the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, 11 destroyers, and the USS Tripoli amphibious group operating in the Middle East as part of the naval blockade. 2 guided missile destroyers, the USS Frank E. Peterson and the USS Michael Murphy, crossed through the Strait of Hormuz as part of a broader mission to clear sea mines previously laid by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. On April 11th, Trump said American forces had started clearing the strait. Retired Admiral James Stavridis, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, described it this way: "The blockade puts economic pressure on Tehran without destroying oil facilities, which the U.S. wants to preserve for the future." But he also cautioned, "This is a big task and a big gamble. Iran has not backed down." The IRGC Navy said that any military vessel approaching the strait would be considered a ceasefire violation and would meet a severe response. Iran's parliament speaker warned that the U.S. naval siege will only raise petrol prices for Americans. The average price of a gallon of gasoline in the U.S. is now more than $4.12, up from less than $3 before the war began. Iran describes the siege against its ports as the U.S. president's revenge of choice against the global economy. The economic consequences are already being felt everywhere. Oil prices are nearing $100 a barrel, up around 40% since the war began. The International Energy Agency, the World Bank, and the IMF issued a joint warning. There will be no quick relief for high fuel and fertilizer prices, even if the Strait of Hormuz reopens, because even after shipping resumes, it will take time for global supplies to return to pre-conflict levels. Russia's Kremlin spokesman warned that the blockade will likely hurt global trade markets. India and Pakistan sent destroyers to escort tankers in the Gulf of Oman. India's Navy launched Operation. Not everyone is following the U.S. lead. French President Emmanuel Macron announced preparations for a peaceful multinational mission aimed at restoring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, saying he would convene a conference with Britain in the coming days. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said the United Kingdom would not join Trump's blockade, but that the UK's efforts would focus on reopening the strait, potentially including minesweeping operations. A senior NATO military official told CBS News that the UK is leading planning efforts for a coalition of more than 40 nations to reopen the Strait of Hormuz and protect freedom of navigation. 3 possible paths lie ahead. Path 1. Diplomacy succeeds. Iran and the U.S. return to the table. A deal is struck. The strait reopens. Oil prices fall. The world exhales. Path 2. Economic pressure works. The blockade cripples Iran's economy. Tehran is forced to negotiate from a position of weakness. A settlement is reached, but on American terms. Path 3. Escalation. Iran retaliates directly against U.S. naval assets. The blockade turns into open naval warfare. The consequences would be catastrophic for global energy markets and for the region. Trump suggested the door for diplomacy remains open, saying he was called by the right people in Iran. But history has shown that in the Strait of Hormuz, nothing is ever simple. The Strait of Hormuz has always been more than just a body of water. It is the jugular vein of the global economy, and right now, hands are tightening around it from both sides. What happens in these waters in the coming days and weeks will not just determine the fate of Iran or the United States. It will shape the price you pay for energy, the food on your table, and the stability of the world order. Stay informed. The situation is changing by the hour. If you found this valuable, like, share, and subscribe. More analysis coming soon.